Hey there guys, how's it going? Today we're going to be taking a look at upgrading my Skywatcher 200mm Newtonian with these two parts. It's been very kindly sent over for usage and review by the folks at backyarduniverse.de. Now what I've got here is a primary mirror mask, which also replaces the primary mirror clips, and a secondary mirror spider, which is an extreme upgrade over the very floppy kind of vanes, the pressed metal vanes that come with Skywatcher Newtonians. Commonly seen actually on quite a few different Newtonians. So we're going to be going through the process of installing these things. I do have on my second screen, I'll just show you the installation instructions from Backyard Universe themselves. I'll be following along with those. Alright guys, so we've got the scope set up right here for you. Hopefully you can see this quite well. The first thing that it advises for us to do is to take off this plastic end ring. Now before I do this, of course, I've just literally taken this off the mount and it's ready to go. So I need to undo everything else that's currently attached, such as my dew heater for the secondary mirror. So let's go ahead and get that thing removed. Just leave this off to one side because I'm going to be reapplying that straight away. Now it recommends you find yourself a good fitting posi-drive screwdriver for removal of this part. Obviously you don't want to go ahead and damage anything at this stage because you're going to be then trying to find replacement screws because it all needs to go back on afterwards. So I'll get on removing this set of screws around the outside. I think there should be 6, and I'll get back to you in just a sec. Alright, so with the last screw just removed now, this thing should come up and off with any luck. Now mine's quite well stuck in, it seems, so I may need to find a way to actually drift this thing slightly out if it doesn't start to move. Oh, so absolutely expect this to be quite stiff, and by quite stiff I mean really stiff. Oh, that were really stiff, but it is now out. You shouldn't be doing this, by the way, with your scope pointed upwards. That is terrible practice. I just want to point that out right now. I'm doing this so that you guys can see what's going on. That is the only reason. This should be done on your scope, like the scope on its side, effectively. Now the next step is going to be to remove the old spider and secondary mirror, effectively. Now you can, at this point, should you wish for a slightly safer removal, remove the secondary mirror independently of this spider, but as it's quite fiddly, to be honest, and I've got quite large hands, I don't want to be trying to pass the mirror through to myself through one of these gaps for extraction. So I'm going to take the whole thing off in one, and while I'm undoing these last few bolts, I will keep a hold of that mirror. So I'm going to take 2 out completely, allowing this thing some freedom to pivot a little bit. Okay, keep those safe. Now I'm going to take out 1 more fully while maintaining support at all times on this spider. Again, don't do this like I'm doing it with the the new pointing upwards. You're just asking to drop something on your primary mirror. So with that last one done, this thing is loose, and with just a little twist, the whole assembly can be removed, like so. Alright guys, so with the old spider now removed from the tube, as you can see right here, the secondary mirror assembly as it comes. I've just used some upgraded bolts to try and make collimation a bit easier. I'm now going to take off the secondary mirror from its stalk. I'm going to deviate from the installation instructions ever so slightly, owing to the fact that I don't want to have to put this secondary mirror on after reinstalling the new spider, effectively. So to do that, I'm just undoing these 3 collimation bolts ever so slightly, as you can see, hopefully. I'm going to take a Phillips head screwdriver, a posi drive, and just getting into that central bolt right there. I'm going to undo that while keeping everything arrested in hand, effectively. That's what I want to do throughout this whole procedure, because if I don't, I might lose the little spring that we're actually going to need for the rest of this installation. So I'm going to carefully take this out. Well, we're not quite there on the end of this thread. Okay, it was just the last turn or so. I've now got the secondary mirror safe. You can just put that to one side. And as you can see, if you were careful, on the end of this, you'll have a small spring. Keep a hold of that. We're going to need it again in just a second. So now, looking at the new Spider, you can see it's got two sides, effectively. So this side has got a small indent, a cutout, which is going to accept the new central screw. As you can see, it's got a small bevel on the side, and this has got a matching bevel inside. And this side's central point has a flat face for which this spring can bear upon. Just like that, hopefully you can see. One other thing you're going to notice about this thing is another clue, an indicator of correct installation direction. So as you're looking at this scope right now, the focuser is looking through the tube in a line like this, from here to here. Now, we want this bolt hole, this collimation bolt right here, which aligns with two of those vanes, to be pointing straight into the focuser draw tube, effectively, just like that. Meaning that these other two are giving you a flat plane against the end of it, is how it's demonstrated on the instructions. But anyway, for me, like I said, I'm going to deviate from the normal installation instructions ever so slightly at this point. I'm going to go ahead and reinstall this secondary in place as is. So I'll just pop this, quite fiddly to do on camera unfortunately, but I'm going to pop the screw, the spring in place and very roughly align the secondary mirror assembly. And now, just with the part turned by hand, I'm going to start to redo that secondary assembly just for a moment. Now, I'm not worried about getting this perfect at this point, I just want it attached and with some tension. Alright, so as you can see, that's now attached. It's not going to go anywhere, but it is still completely free to move around effectively. So you know it can be aligned up properly when we come to collimate. But just at this point now, I'm going to put the new replacement grubs in place. Now these two sets of grubs are ever so slightly different. Your kit should come with 6, 3 of which will have pointed ends. I'll just try and show you the slight difference. So there's the Allen key side. Here is the opposite end. So hopefully you can see that's a pointed one. That's a flattened, kind of slightly flattened, rounded one. In this case, I'm going to use the flattened, rounded ones as it gives us a slightly larger contact patch and won't bite in quite so hard to that very soft secondary mirror stalk. It's not really made out of any tough material. I'm just going to wind these down now and getting them just roughly in place. I'm not paying any special attention to this at all, just getting them in place. Alright guys, so as you can see, I've got these 3 grub screws now just roughly in place. They protrude still ever so slightly because I've got this actually quite tight up to the neck of the secondary mirror stalk right there, as you can see. I haven't adjusted anything to do with elevation yet, so maybe when I have done that, none of these will be showing or anything. But that's unimportant at this point. So I'm just at this point now going to turn this around, get it very roughly aligned with the bolt holes, and start to just squeeze it into place. So as you can see, it's quite a tight fit. It's very well machined. Don't worry about this thing going anywhere. Don't do what I'm doing, by the way. I may have already just said this, but never do this installation with your scope pointing upwards. It's a terrible idea, as you may well drop something on your primary mirror. I'm lucky that I haven't, but I needed to do it this way so it was filmable for you guys. Now you're going to need to locate the 4 short Allen bolts that come with this kit. Find the right Allen key that goes with them. And then at this point, you're going to want to get one of these actually centralized, if you like. So I'm just going to do this one that's closest to me. I want to get it centralized in its pre-drilled hole. So what I'm talking about here, if I can just turn this to show you. As you can hopefully see, right there, the hole that is pre-cut out of the steel tube has the new spiders cut out and drill, tapped hole, perfectly aligned in the center of it. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten this one up on its own right now. I've got the wrong Allen key right there. That's a good start. So I'm going to go ahead, get that fully tightened up. So now when I go ahead and chase this around and align all the rest of them, one after the other, you know, kind of pulling them into position like so, that first one that I've done never moves. So we're not going to end up in a position where we're just kind of chasing our tail, trying to get a perfect adjustment. So that's good, tighten that up, and then around we go until we're finished doing all of them. Alright guys, so it's time now to basically just put this ring back on the end of the scope. Now it's got a couple of cutouts. These align with the seam in the tube, hopefully you can see right there. In my case, it is the left-hand cutout I'll be using, as that aligns me up for the next screw hole. So I'm going to go ahead, get this thing pressed in now, because it was a really horribly tight fit, to be honest, and that might take some time and persuasion. Oh, all right, that is back in place. That was pretty horrible as far as jobs go, but it's time to get my screws for this back in now. And then we're just about done with this end of the installation. All right, guys, so with that ring back in place and fully tightened down, we can now go ahead and say that this end of the installation, at least, is completely done. Time to move on to that primary mirror next. Alright guys, so we've got the scope in the correct orientation now. It's on its side, ready for the next part of work. We're going to be removing this primary mirror cell and putting it safely here to actually continue working on. To do that, we need to take off this layer of tape and get to the screws underneath, which are just Phillips head standard screws. Now you may ask yourself, why the layer of tape, Luke? And it's a valid question, and it's because these Skywatcher Newtonians have a lot of light leaks, and a really common one is right around the side of the primary mirror cell to tube. Effectively there, it can leak light through the side and give you all kinds of weird reflections going on, and it's just easily sorted with a little turn of electrical tape. So I'm going to go ahead, get this taken off, and get this primary mirror taken out. Alright guys, so with that last screw undone, I'm just going to make sure everything is out. There should be 6 screws in your possession. It is going to be a case of supporting the rest of the scope, as it's going to significantly unbalance once I start to wiggle free this primary mirror cell. And now it's just on the way out. Carefully wait for it to pop out that last little bit. The last thing you want to do at this point is give it a big horrid jerking motion and put a gash straight on the coating of your primary mirror. So care is advised. Take your time. There we go, it's just popped free, and there is a rather dirty primary mirror, and I can just put the rest of the tube slightly safer to the side right there. Leave that leaning there. It shouldn't roll anywhere. It's arrested by the camera, which I've tactically left in place. All right, 6 screws, keep those safe. Yep, next up, removal of these clips. Now, as you can see, these aren't badly set. This one's quite loose. This one, however, a little bit tight as it stands, so that could have been causing some slight issues with our stars. Now, obviously, extreme caution is advisable don't, you know, don't rush this. If you're going to rush anything, make sure it's not this. But you don't need me to tell you that. Take your time. Get all of these out safely, and once they come free, make sure that anything that could fall on your mirror is supported. So these are just about free, not quite. All right, so that's one old support assembly removed. All right, and so with our old assemblies removed, I've completely disassembled those, so each one comes down into these component parts right here. We don't need this metal washer anymore, if you can see that. All we need are the 2 screws that came out of it and your rubber grommet, your rubber spacing grommet kind of thing. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead now and just dry fit this arrangement just so I can see exactly what actually needs cutting off of these grommets, as that's the actual next step outlined in the instructions, is marking and removing any excess material. So we completely eliminate any chance of clip diffraction. So to do that, I've just dropped all of the bolts, hopefully you can see, back into this retaining ring. I'm going to put our grommets just roughly in place right now. That was going to be awkward, I can tell. And now one by one, if this plays ball, I'll just feed these in. And we can see what actually needs to be done. So a bit of a delicate operation. Now it looks to me like on my actual grommets that's installed right now on the Quattro, these may need no modification at all, actually. Which is interesting, because the ones shown in the instructions definitely did need cutting down. Otherwise, you know, one of the main points of actually installing this ring would have just been nullified by leaving all that excess rubber visible. So I'm just going to, it's a little bit too tight there, Lukey boy. Just going to very carefully put a very small amount of pressure into each of these screws before we proceed. So as you can see, everything is still able to be moved. Nothing's actually tight yet. And the amount of protrusion on the actual worst offender of these, which is this one, is absolutely minuscule. So in this scenario, I think I'm actually just going to go ahead and kind of not bother with doing that last little bit of the installation instruction where it says to cut. That it just doesn't seem actually worth modifying on the Quattro. It may well be different on the 200p if you're installing it on that kind of thing, but on this, no. So the next step is actually going to be getting these correctly tensioned. Now, it's very easy to over tighten this kind of thing and pinch your optics. In fact, almost always when these things arrive, one of the first things I do is take the primary mirror cell out and make sure that these aren't over tightened from factory, which they often are. I think they're worried about mirrors slipping around a little bit and maybe rattling loose during shipping. So they over tighten them a little bit at factory, or maybe it's just carelessness. But almost always, every single one of the Newtonians that I've owned, and I mean nearly every single one, has had primary mirror clips that's way too tight. So now these, just by feel, are actually pretty darn close when done by hand. You can see the primary mirror should be free to move. I guess I may have just ever so slightly over arrested it there. should be free to move around just underneath this. A common test you can do is a piece of paper. I'm not going to do it with this because there's too much dirt on my primary mirror. By sliding this underneath, I'm running the risk of scratching that coating up. So I'm going to do it by feel. But that is a common test, just kind of using a piece of paper as a feeler gauge for this segment. It's really hard to kind of explain what you're feeling for, but you want the mirror to be held in place, but not actually truly touched by anything, if that makes sense. So you can see the rubber's free to swish around on that, so it's just too loose. Now it's just touching. Rubber's free to move. And now it is just touching. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing on this camera. But yeah, rubber's totally free to move. And now, with the absolute smallest of turns, it's arrested. It is still free to move, which means that the primary mirror isn't being squashed by that, and that's actually another successful installation complete. Okay then guys, so the ring is successfully installed. Hopefully you can see that on this camera. My mirror is a little bit dirty, but I'm going to leave it for now. It's not too bad. I think we'll be losing, I don't know, a few percent of reflectivity due to it being kind of a little bit dirty and dusty. But the main thing is now, this is installed in a kind of safe manner, if you can see. It's not going anywhere, but these rubber grommets are still free to move. Hopefully you can see. See that? So it's not actually pinching the mirror at all, it's just stopping it from falling out of the tube, which is all it's really meant to do. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and get this mirror back into this tube. So I'm going to move anything that could scratch my tube. I'll put those old spacers to one side. I'm going to locate right now the cutout. As you can see on the cell itself, it has a cutout for the seam in the tube. I'm going to go ahead and move the tube into position, make it ever so slightly easier for me to position this thing back in. And now, I would advise giving things a good clean if you could, but for the sake of this recording, not too worried. There we go. I just located my cutout a moment ago and I'd already lost it. Right. Once that's aligned, this should, with just a little cajoling, be free to go back in and be pushed up flush. Now, this has gone in perfect first time. I have aligned everything up nicely, if you can hopefully see on camera. Those holes ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead, chase myself around, popping these screws in most of the way tight, and then I'll give them a final tighten in just a second. Okay then guys, so we're done with that now. It's all installed, it's ready to go. I'm just going to go ahead and collimate everything, get it back on the mount. Alright guys, so everything's now reinstalled, all the upgrades are complete. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing back on the mount, then get it collimated and ready for the next clear night when we can actually test these upgrades out and see what we think to them basically. So that is about it from me for this one. I hope you've enjoyed this probably slightly different video, and if so, leave a like on it for me if you would. It really does help YouTube know what to do with these videos and if you should push it to more people or not. Anyway, I'll catch you in the next one. Look after yourselves guys, and until then, hopefully, clear skies. Well then guys, that's now installed and everything is complete on this this scope upgrade that we just went through. The last thing to do now is get this thing back on the mount, get it collimated, and basically ready for the next clear night that we get. Well then guys, that about wraps things up for me. I'd just like to say at this point, if you made it this far, then I'd like to extend to you a virtual fist bump or a handshake or whatever you like. Thank you, basically. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time. I realise for many people this was probably a bit of a boring video, but hopefully it helped at least someone out there or made you consider this upgrade kit, because I really do think it is a good kit. At that point, I'd like to say thank you to Backyard Universe for sending this thing out for me to take a look at. I'm actually currently just finishing my first night of imaging using it, and I have to say, after getting that scope back on the mount, getting it recollimated, what a joy. A total night and day difference in terms of collimation of that secondary mirror versus the kind of standard spider that comes with the Skywatcher as is, which it's not great, let's be honest. And when you're making your adjustments on those collimation bolts, and when you take the torque off the tool and everything kind of springs back a little bit, it's not conducive to accuracy. So just such a huge upgrade. If you want to get yourself one of these parts, then I highly recommend that you do so. And I say that unreservedly. So that's about it from me. Anyway, guys, I won't take up any more of your time because I've already taken up quite enough. So look after yourselves. I will see you in the next video, hopefully with some proper results from this. And until then, look after yourselves and clear skies.